see if we ring them a bit quicker. Big circle.
Do that.
Catley was a minor canon of Worcester Cathedral, and his contribution to ringing would be profound, and he probably didn't even think about it. Catley was an enthusiast, and with his great friends Gilbert Scott, Lord Grimthorpe, and Gladstone's brother-in-law, Lord Littleton, he restored the cathedral. In 1865, there were only 8 bells in the tower. 5 of them are now in the cloister. Catley loved bells, and with Grimthorpe he devised a plan for a light ring of 10. That was until he heard Mancroft bells. From that moment he wanted 12, and the weight of the tenor got bigger and bigger and bigger. In 1865 the cathedral had a 20 hundredweight ring of 8. By 1870, it had a 50 hundredweight ring of 12. Catley had a big idea, and he made it a reality. Even by today's standards, it's a remarkable achievement. In 1928, the bells were cast again. Local bell ringers petitioned the chapter to make them lighter. They were too hard and heavy. Chapter ignored the bell ringers, and the organist, Ivor Atkins, insisted the bell should be in B. And tailors cast what are one of the best rings of bells in the country. In 1904, the Bell News refused to publish the first peals of London Surprise Major on handbells because some influential London ringers said it was impossible. In the 1930s, the Central Council was asked to debate a motion to ban Simpson tuning. A few years later, many ringers weren't at all keen on Dove's new guide. In the 1980s, when we restored Leighton Buzzard bells after a fire, many bell ringers wrote to our PCC saying the bells should go back as a light ring of 10. No. I wanted to do something better, and so did the church. Soon afterwards, the bull ring became a 16, and that was wrong too. The Ringing World correspondence was ridiculous. The same fate befell the Perth project. It took a while, no one gave up, and what a great result.
It's a little more generalised. I'm sure you all know someone who rings plain bell doubles by just following a bell. So then you go, I'm going to follow the 2 and then the 4, and they work their way throughout the whole thing. Again, they've focused very much on the outcome. They've focused on this is where I want to be. I want to be able to ring plain bell doubles. Meaning that if you introduce a new calling to them, then they start to struggle. I'm sure you're all familiar with someone who's like this. And I think this is summed up very well by a man called Daniel Wong. So this is actually about learning in schools rather than reading. I think it can be applied to almost any learning we do. And it's don't let the goal of getting straight A's become an intercession. It's about cultivating your strengths and learning so you can contribute more effectively. So that basically means when you're ringing, doesn't matter what method you can ring at this time. You want to be able to contribute as a band and you want to be able to contribute towards your tower wall. Okay? Awesome, thank you. So we want to also encourage our students to think problems through. If we tell our student the answer every single time, then they'll get used to us being there and telling them the answers, which means that as soon as you step away, suddenly they're on their own. So if you introduce how we think things through, how we learn new methods, how we work out problems in ringing to your student and get them to do it with you, then it means you can step back a lot more and you're not as necessary. One really cool thing we can do now, which we probably couldn't do even 20 years ago, is actually get our students to analyse their own ringing. So I'm sure everyone in here has got a phone. And one really cool thing that phones at the moment can do is they can actually record and then play it back in slow motion. So a problem that happens, and it's maybe half a second mistake, can suddenly be really focused in on and analysed. And you can then show your student exactly what it looks like they're doing and exactly how, you can just show them exactly what they look like, sorry. And then you can ask them where the problem is and ask them how they think they could work this and how they think they could develop this. This works especially well if you've got a photograph of yourself or of someone else, because I know for a fact my ringing is not perfect. I'm sure if pressed, almost everyone in here would go, yes, I have a copy.
We don't publish our results for another couple of weeks. I think that will tip over the 100 million, and we do have a personal goal to do 100 million to churches and charities. What else do we do? So we do these things for churches, the valuation and risk management. So we value that cathedral there. I can't remember what it is, but it's quite a lot of millions. We give advice, we have made simple guides. Something that those of you who are lucky enough and to be coming on my risk assessment workshop later will see that we have things like templates for risk assessments. We have tailored products. We work in the church environment effectively. We do publications, we have a competition, and something I should have put on there is we've got something called Trust 130, where if you take out home insurance through Ecclesiastical, we give £130 to the church, or the church that you nominate. Do visit our website, it's on there. But equally the last 2 points, and again as Graham's touched on, I guess the fact that actually should explain that I'm not in charge of the whole church's department. I'm the church underwriting manager, which means I am in charge of setting the risk appetite, the goals, the individual decisions, and I do
health, well-being, human rights, enabling people to live free from harm, free from abuse and neglect. It's fundamental to Christian ministry and mission work. So safeguarding is part and parcel of what we are as a Christian church. It's not something that kind of sits over here that we just do sometimes or we have done to us. It might feel like that at times when you're being presented with DBS, as in confidential declaration forms, and all of the operational bits of it. But really what we're trying to do is about care, and it's about understanding and promoting safety and well-being for everyone who accesses the church, and that's really what we mean by safeguarding. The challenge for the church is that we are trying to safeguard all of these people, children, young people, adults at risk of abuse and neglect, survivors of abuse who have been very vocal, and we have made a concerted effort to listen to the experiences of survivors, so they're very much informing our improvement journey. Those who pose a risk, church officers, leaders, helpers, and volunteers. And Marcus touched on it it was quite helpful when he said, really as bell ringers, you all are authorized volunteers. Therefore, in terms of the clergy discipline measure 2016, you are a church officer. It's probably hard to think about yourself as a church officer because of the way that bell ringing works. I am not a bell ringer, and I have to hold my hands up and say I don't understand all aspects of it. It's been very useful for me to hear the sessions this morning, but really and truly, in terms of what you do and where you're doing it, and you're doing it on behalf of the PCC. You are, by definition, church officers and are subject to safer recruitment and training, so we'll come on to that very shortly. I have to say, this is quite challenging for me. I'm a trained social worker and I've worked around the world for the last 17 years. And when I came to the church, I thought, it's a church, everyone will be on the same page, it'll be
They're
very
there for
easy.
5 minutes, and then they kind of disappear. Do you see that in yours, or are you all really, really motivating and really good? But you may be, but some of the people in your tower might not be. That might be helping to put them off, or not to help you, so not to be on the negative. So we want to give you about the key message about things to take away today. And we're going to get you to do a little exercise later on, hopefully if we get the time. And the prize is a little mini ring. Okay, so I 3D print these, not that I'm flogging them today, but I do sometimes, so you might see it later. So that's really what we want to do. And it's really about a perspective. And we're going to take you through this academic thing, so we're both lecturers, about a thing called threshold concepts. Okay, so hand over to Louise.
That's lovely. Okay, so on here, I remember we've been really, really lucky, I guess, in a way, because we've worked with some really fantastic ringers. And, you know, from that perspective, we've been lucky. I've got to move across in front of the camera. And really, the thought we wanted to really just leave you with, or just to start to get people thinking about, it's very, it's very much around when was the last time you actually heard a beautiful ringing? You know, because if you actually stood outside a tower, there is some fantastic ringing that goes on. But you can actually be outside the tower when I'm ringing, and you hear a lot of clattering. And it's like one of those things, and I think one of our biggest learning points was very much that we were lucky that we could hear what good ringing was. But not everybody actually knows what that is. So if you're a new learner, what does good ringing sound like? So on YouTube at the moment, I can go on and click and I can hear some beautiful things, but nobody ever points out to you exactly what is fantastic ringing. So we kind of just wanted to leave you with that good sort of thought today. But also to think about, would any of your new ringers that come to your tower actually be able to describe what beautiful ringing was? Yeah. And then in the middle we've put something up there just to say, take a belfie to remember the day. I think I read that in one of the local articles. I thought it was really good, rather than a selfie. Take a belfie. But you can actually record it. So we've recorded some really good ringing as we've got around as well, and it does make a real difference. So. Yeah.
Okay, so one of the things when we're managing or when we're teaching people what to do, the things that are really missing us. And what we should know is time is limited.
Weighted with railway bed plates. Very interesting stay arrangement, which is brilliant. So there's none of the fear of that frisson of transmitting the fear of broken stay to people you're teaching. We've reset the stays in a couple of minutes. This is a public space. Towers out to the public. So even the peel boards are written to the public. So the clock after Big Ben was the second biggest flatbed clock in the country, but there are no external faces. The dumbbells are ring of 8 and can be run separately as bells, so you can have 8 people learning different things at the same time. So the great expression, great time. The exhibition, which is in bits at the moment, was paid for by HLF, which tells the story of bells in the city of Worcester. And on the table, there's 3 bits of information about here, including the exhibition. Please take one each, all of you. There's a business book, please sign it. And also our peel book, which after spending so much money on practical things, this is a beautiful piece of work done by Claire Ricketts, who many of you know, who rings at Exeter. So please have a flip through it. That's very quickly. So we're at the bottom of the 14th century tower, and you'll notice that there's a lot there, and how many are on that side. The tower was solid, it will fall down. by Scott and Grimthorpe, and the wigwam, the wooden work, goes down to the piers of the tower and supports the bell frame above us. So the bells hang in two towers, they're sort of keyed together. 16 bells plus the Borden bell, and the blue and white sallies are 3 of the semitones, one rope hasn't been swapped. So the sharp second is the new Wesley bell, and the alloy of the bell and the shape of the bell is identical to the Taylor 1928 bells. So using modern I'll explain why the quarter's off when we go upstairs. So the new bell matches the old bells exactly. So at last we've got science in bell founding. That's going to be really good at the business grade standards. And so that gives us a ring of 10 with the 11th as a tenor, and a light ring of 8. There's another ring of 8, and then a heavier ring of 8, and we also have the minor 10. There's not much of it, so when we ring, everything twists. This wooden frame sits on top of a subframe which sits upon all the pine timbers, vertical timbers, and we discovered a few years ago that everything had shrunk so you could see daylight through it. So this effectively was a trampoline with 12 tons of ringing bells on it. So that's what all this, you see all these brackets, it's all tied together, so we did work with our structural engineer on that. We're always steeple keeping, and there's a lot of painting to do, and one of the reasons why we do a lot of painting is that if ever a nut gets loose, the paint will crack, so you can tell. So the tie rods are useless because they bond into the oak, because the tannin in the oak bonds with the iron, so they're useless. But the frame's pretty solid. It was put in 1870 with the original 12. The 2 extra bells over there means that 2 of the ropes fall behind the circle. So you ring some of the combinations, you can't see all the bells, which is another reason why our teaching process is feel here, see, not feel, see, hear. The new bell is around the corner, have a look at that. So these are probably, I think they're the best ringer bells. They've all, back 4 got wooden clappers in, and we've got glass louvers, and the wooden boards just are to stop the rain coming in. And one thing Marcus wasn't relevant to his talk, EIG are doing now drone tower analysis and spire analysis to look for defects and cracks. So they've just done our tower. I found loads of questions. Do you want to hear this bell? Are you ready?
It would be a scheme for people to follow after they've completed level 5 of learning the ropes, and it would help to direct them and as they continue their learning. Well, it still is that, but it can also be used much more widely, which is what we're going to be trying to tell you today. As Graham said, I just struck through most of my presentation because, as Graham said, it's now open for any ringer at any stage of learning to follow. If they're not already registered on SmartRinger, then you can encourage them to join by logging them in through your account, and they can request certificates of achievement in the same way as anybody else can. And the progress books can be ordered through the art shop. So the benefits of having a structured learning scheme to introduce concepts and new skills in a graduated, logical way, until I didn't write this, is it's long been recognised with many activities, and the same is true for bell ringing, and that's how the concept of the Learning the Ropes scheme was brought about, and the Learning the Ropes scheme Plus scheme continues that work. So it's flexible too, it can be dipped into, so unlike Learning the Ropes, there's no particular need to follow the scheme from level 1 to level 5. As we're going to see, there's 10 modules here, but you don't have to follow all of them from 1 to 10. You could start with, in fact, you could start with some of the later ones, Obviously, for some, you're not going to be able to dip straight into surprise major, having only just learned to ring plain Bob minor inside. But there are other things that you can do.
I was there.
So let's start.
And one evening we were just debating what, if you had to come up with methods to teach ringing surprise major from scratch with a clean sheet of paper, what would you actually start with? And what would be the progression? With hoping for methods which are fairly nice to ring in the plain course, because most surprise major methods do get wrong in plain courses at practice. But with each subsequent method teaching you something that the previous one hadn't. So they've got to introduce some new concept, but not without the jumps being too big. And the biggest debate actually we had in the Project Pickle Date discussion group, which followed, was whether Cambridge was the first method. And so much so that some people said, if you say Cambridge Major is the first method, you have failed. You have failed to be courageous enough to point out that it really isn't the best place to start. We start with Cambridge Major because we always have. People people bring Cambridge Major because you run Cambridge Minor. Well, maybe that was the wrong thing. But we're not really brave enough to do that. There are definitely different ways of starting. You could, Kent, Cambridge, the second one of those, that's what I did. Kent, Cambridge Minor, Cambridge Major. You could definitely, I would say, hands up if you think Yorkshire Major is easier than Cambridge Major. That's quite a sizable part. What about Cambridge is easier? Okay, slightly more for Yorkshire. I would say Yorkshire is the easier. Cambridge Major, those long places in Cambridge Major. Cambridge Major is, I think, just too hard as a first surprise major method to learn. Long Cambridge places are too long. People forget how far they are through them. And actually, long Cambridge places don't come up in very many other methods at all. I went through the method sheets for the 100 spliced to all the work a couple of nights ago to see, and they were all mostly wrong place methods. But long Cambridge places only came up in 5 methods out of 100. 2 of those were Cambridge ligature and 1 was superlative. They're just not very useful.